The 6th of March, 1945, Cologne, Germany. The cathedral's black spires hang over a street of brick dust and blown glass. A German Panther eases its gun across a corner it owns by habit, wait for the American nose to wander, take the front plate, disappear in smoke. They have done this all month. The commander's shoulders loosen. Another Sherman, same drill. Across the junction, a different silhouette crawls into view. Low glacis, flat turret face a barrel that looks too heavy for the hull. The driver inches. The turret hardly trembles. Both crews see each other in the same breath. The German waits for the familiar wobble before the kill. It doesn't come. Inside the American tank, the sight picture settles like a coin on a table, range short, no wind to solve. Up. The loader's fists thud brass. The breech closes. The gun exhales. The first 90mm hits like a door blown inward. Orange-white light jets from seams. Paint turns to vapor. The cupola becomes a lamp. The second round is already moving when the first finishes. Heat climbs the turret ring and stays. No radio call. No order. Just heat. The Pershing holds the corner 2 inches right, listening. The Panther's gun does not return. Oil smell thickens. Glass ticks as it cools. On this block the rhythm ends. The one where the American flinches. The German punishes. The street decides. For a moment the city is only light and the sound of nothing, and a crew that expected a ritual meets an answer that does not hesitate. The film will keep this second forever. By January 1945, the Western Front is a long exhale turning into a sprint. The Ardennes counterstroke has spent itself. The snow is still in the ditches, but the shock is gone. Bridges are repaired faster than they can be rebroken. Fuel dumps move forward, and the map shows a slow bend toward the Rhine that no one can straighten back. Yet on the street where armor meets brick at pistol distances, a few beliefs still hold. German crews believe the corner is theirs. A panther or a tiger wedged behind masonry will kill before it is killed. The silhouette of an American medium edging into a junction means one thing: a first shot that decides the next 30 seconds. American battalions carry the memory of that truth. They have buried crews whose tanks lit up at the first hit and stayed lit. They are tired in the way units get tired after months of winter and short sleep, less talk on the intercom, more automatic motions. But the army that feeds them is not tired. Trains keep arriving. Depots keep throwing spares forward. Wreckers pull hulls at night and put them back into circulation before dawn. The push toward the river is not a parade. It is a conveyor that does not slow when it hits a city. Cologne sits inside that 2-month window where local habits still kill and new answers begin to erase those habits. The cathedral spires mark a place where the road network matters, where the river is a threshold, and where every corner can cost a day if the old pattern holds. If the pattern remains German, big cats freezing ground, one intersection at a time, the American timetable stretches, and stretched timetables mean more fuel burned, more sorties diverted, more convoys exposed. If the pattern breaks, if a heavier gun with steadier glass shortens the exchange to 1 American shot instead of 2 German shots, the entire tempo changes. Streets stop being traps and become corridors again. The confidence on the German side has reasons. Optics are good. Guns are flat. Armor is angled. Crews that have survived this long know how to set a stage and let the enemy walk into it. Even with fuel counted by the can, even with replacements green, a single well-placed cat can write rules for a block and make a column negotiate instead of advance. That is what the city fight has looked like for months, caution forced by the threat of the first shot from a hidden gun. The American answer is not a miracle weapon arriving to win the war by itself. It is an upgrade placed where the habit hurts, backed by an organization willing to risk it immediately. A heavier round, a sight picture that steadies faster, a turret drive that stops where it should. None of that matters if it is alone. It matters when it shows up in time, gets fuel and parts without ceremony, and is crewed by men who can learn on contact because they expect to see another sunrise. The machine and the system that sustains it are the same story told at 2 scales. This is why Cologne matters to more than the crews on the film. At the city level, the stake is measured in blocks and hours. At the theatre level, it is measured in whether the ground war reaches the far bank before the calendar flips another page. Each day, shaved off a crossing window deprives the defence of time to set more corner traps to seed, more choke points to arrange more small battles that steal large time. Each day added to that window hands attrition to the wrong side convoys, longer on the roads, aircraft flying cover instead of interdiction, artillery burning through fuses and barrels while waiting on armour to solve the next street. German units feel the squeeze and push the last beliefs harder. A tiger still tells a column where to stop. A panther still makes an avenue expensive. There is pride in that, and discipline and skill. But pride is not a supply line. Discipline cannot fill empty tanks. Skill does not change the math when you must save the vehicle that kills for tomorrow as well as today. The aura around the cats is real, but aura does not cross rivers or replace steel. American commanders read the same ledgers. They do not need to be right forever, they need to be right soon. So they take the risk the system allows, put the heavier gun in the place where the corner trap lives, and see if the corner trap dies. If it dies, the push carries into the next city with fewer pauses. If it lives, there are more hulls behind this one, and more trucks bringing what those hulls eat. That is the wager being placed in the first week of March on streets that used to belong to the ambusher. The duel the camera catches is not a trivia question about which tank is better in an abstract field. It is a test of whether the defender can still paralyze motion in a city by reputation and first shot, or whether the attacker can keep motion alive with an answer that repeats. If the answer repeats, the myth that stops columns becomes a target that draws them. If it does not, the river waits longer and takes more in payment. A city corner decides fights by seconds and angles, not by posters and parades. A gun that steadies a sight picture one breath sooner owns that corner. A crew that can send weight through the same rectangle of air twice before the other turret finishes its first correction turns masonry into a killing tool. That is what matters here, not numbers in a pamphlet, but which habits survive the first 3 seconds of exposure. The German habit is practiced. Park the hull with the front plate kissed up to masonry, only the barrel showing. Pre-aim into the box where an American nose must appear to see past the wall. Let the first sight of each other be the last sight the American crew has. The corner becomes an execution stage. The Panther's long gun is made for straight streets. Its optics write fine lines. Its crew understands that the first shot is not merely damage, it is shock. Shock steals the other gunner's hands for a half second, and a half second is enough to land the second round where the first one tore. It has worked all winter. The American habit until now has been survival by ritual. Smoke the bend. Creep the nose wide to bait the shot. Back down the opposite curb if the flash comes. Call for guns with bigger voices. Try another street that costs less. Crews carry the memory of crews who met a corner wrong and did not get to change the plan. They are careful because the city punishes hurry. They are slow because they are alive. A Pershing's value in this place is simple. It removes one pause. The turret stops where the commander points and stays there when the driver inches. The sight does not float as much when the hull creeps forward to break the angle. The recoil brings the reticle back to where the brick seam was not 2 windows away. The loader can feed big brass at a pace that matches the gunner's need without making the gunner wait on his breath. These are not statistics. They are reasons a man can talk calm while heat climbs the barrel. They compress the time between seeing and erasing. Range matters in a way the map cannot show. At 200 meters, the gun that stays steady wins. Wind is not a question in an alley. Drop is not a debate. The target fills enough of the glass that the aim point is not a coin on a table, it is the table itself. In that distance band the fight is not mathematics, but rhythm acquire, send, reacquire, correct inches, send again. If your second shot is moving before the other man recovers from the first, the street belongs to you even if he fired first into air or facade. If he never fires because your first shot took the sentence out of his mouth, you are not brave, you are simply earlier. Armor angles and plate that would save you at 600 meters in a field do not save you from heat dumped close and flat. A heavy round hitting square into a turret face at city distance does not ask about the engineer's intentions. It asks whether there is fuel vapor where men are breathing. If the answer is yes, the next sounds will be short and bright. This is why crews talk about front plate confidence differently in alleys than in hedgerows. In alleys, the question is less can he penetrate than who makes the other man flinch first. Optics and awareness decide who flinches. German glass is clean and sharp. It has taught crews to expect to see first and fire first. But sharp glass tied to a habit can betray you when the habit is wrong. If you expect the American nose to wander, you will wait for the wobble before you commit. If it does not wobble, and if his reticle settles while yours is still searching for the comfortable picture you prefer, you lose the instant your muscles trained you to want. City fights are full of this training that bought survival last month buys a funeral today. Radio makes or breaks a second shot. Inside iron boxes, words can choke. A commander who can say 2 words that mean one action, on, send, gives his gun team free hands instead of a lecture. A loader who does not need to be told the next type because the situation is simple, close-range, center mass, keep feeding, keeps the barrel talking. A driver who knows that 6 inches forward will open the sight picture and 6 inches more will overexpose. The hull can move without being asked. None of that is heroic. It is a drill where each man removes thinking from one more step. In a city, thinking is slower than feeling what the hull and the gun need. German crews feel too. They smell the oil that means a hydraulic leak. They taste the metal that means the air is wrong. They know the weight of the second round when the first one did not end it. They have practiced breaking contact by backing a length, firing smoke, letting the other man fire into where they were. It works often enough to build faith. Faith kills you when a gun that did not exist on this street last week exists here now and refuses you the pause you need to begin your escape. By the time you reach for the intercom to say, left 2, the air inside the turret is already a color it should never be. Urban geometry adds traps, pavement crowns in the center, so a hull that straddles a crown rocks differently than one riding a gutter. Tracks climb rubble at different rates. A driver who has learned the building's debris under his left track can present the right armor face across a full block without the gunner losing his horizon. A commander who picks a corner with a recessed doorway to tuck the bow into buys 2 degrees of surprise back. The American crew that has learned these small saves arrives at the junction with less motion to damp than the German crew expects to see. That is the quiet edge, the one you cannot design only field long enough for men to learn. Ammunition choice is not romance either. High explosive at a window you think hides a tube, armor piercing at a cupola that moves wrong. The loader needs to know which rack holds which without eyes. He needs to know his commander's voice patterns well enough that the next shell is in his hands before the order finishes. Time in a city is the thing no depot can deliver. You steal it by removing questions from the inside of your own machine. Even the cokes and the bowgun have work. Suppression in a street is not about hitting a person. It is about convincing a man behind a shutter not to lift a tube while your main gun is settling. A short burst at a balcony that might hide an eye buys the 2 heartbeats the main gun needs. If your commander trusts the cokes to hold that balcony while he keeps the main glass on the enemy turret, you do not have to pick which threat you face. You face both at once. Crews that can do this move through cities like a single animal, not a committee. There is a reason the film matters. It shows the moment when the German corner trick meets a machine and crew that do not give it oxygen. You can see the old pattern try to start. You can see it fail to light. The rest of the war at this scale is a million small failures to light for men who needed the old pattern to protect them. You do not need to know the thickness of anything to understand why a second round that leaves a muzzle before the first one is finished ends an argument. Change the terrain and the verdict shifts. In open ground at 800 meters, the German gun writes faster lines, and the American hull pays for its approach unless covered by smoke guns and aircraft. At night, everything slows into guesswork, and nerves become ammunition. In rain and mud, the machine with a driver who can feel slip before slide wins more often than the one with a slightly better table of organization. But in tight stone, where sight time is short and rounds are heavy, the combination that steadies first and repeats without drama is the one that lives to clear the next intersection. None of this is mystical. It is a ladder C, sooner settle, sooner send again before he breathes. Every rung you shave is one fewer place for a myth to hide. The Pershing did not arrive to make crews brave. It arrived to make the crews calm lethal inside the window the city allows. The Panther did not become harmless. It became mortal on terms it had once dictated. The street did not become safe. It became fair, and fairness is fatal to an aura that depended on fear. He tastes cold cloth and cordite before he sees them. Cupola cracked open breath, pushing steam against the rim. The commander lets the street soak into his ears, the tin rattle of a shutter, the elastic tick of cooling glass, a pigeon moving somewhere above the gutters. The gun is already framed into the kill box, half a car width left of the corner where an American nose has to show to see past the wall. He says nothing, because there is nothing to say. The loader knows the first round by the way the commander's shoulder hovers. The gunner knows it by the way the track brake bites and releases in tiny chews, setting the hull into the masonry. He has killed Americans here by waiting. They always swing too far to see show too much before they shoot wobble while the driver corrects. He can feel his back loosen under wool and leather. 2 shots if the first doesn't finish it. 3 if they panic and reverse. The corner will decide, and the corner belongs to him. Across the junction, another crew breathes through the same air. The loader has a scuffed thumbnail and a habit of tapping the rim of the casing twice before he slides it home. The driver keeps his hands soft on the sticks and talks with the tracks instead of the radio. The commander stands with his headset cable looped around an elbow so it doesn't snag when he dips to check the left periscope. The gunner folds his cheek into the sight rubber the way he always does when he wants the world to stop moving. Up, the loader says. A brass shoulder thumps into the chamber and vanishes behind steel. The breech talks back with a short clack that means it is thinking of closing. The gunner rides the sight while the driver feeds inches and then takes one back. The reticle will settle. It always does. He trusts that more than any voice. The German gunner watches the nose appear. He expects the telltale drift, the little float that American turrets make while the driver finishes finding center. He waits for it, without deciding to wait. The reticle nose of his own gun is already there, tucked into the rectangle of air he knows the enemy must cross. The loader's hand is on the next round in the rack, out of habit. 1, then 2. The script writes itself. The drift never comes. The American turret is a stubborn coin. It sits where it means to sit. The driver's creep does not smear the sight. It irons it. The German gunner feels the surprise in his shoulders before he names it. His muscles were ready to ride the wobble to catch the pause. There is no pause. He leans a hair to the right to see if the glass has lied. It has not. Hold, the American commander says, which in this tank means send when you are ready. He does not add a noun, a preposition, a lecture. The gunner's finger takes the slack out of the trigger and rests on the ridge between 2 breaths. The loader's palm is already on the next casing. He is not waiting to be told type. At this range, there is only one type. The German commander reaches for the intercom to check lay and give the last correction he always gives, 2 left low by a hair. The words ring in his own skull, not the net. The turret interior has turned bright and crowded. For a moment he thinks the gunner fired, and the muzzle flash came back into the cupola. Then the heat reaches him, and the thought leaves. Inside the American turret, the gun recoils and comes home to almost the same window frame as if it never left. The gunner's right hand twitches millimeters on elevation, and then stops. The loader is already dragging the next round out of the rack, because there is nothing else in his universe except the rim under his fingers and the hunger in the breech. He does not look at the target. He looks at the black shape where brass goes and keeps that shape full. The Panther breathes flame out of seams it did not know it had. Paint turns to air. Something heavy falls inside the turret and refuses to get up. The German loader's hand is between 2 cases when the air jumps from hot to loud. He pulls his fingers back and sees oil moving where oil should not move. The gun is no longer a tool, it is furniture. On, the American commander says. That is the whole correction. The driver feeds 2 inches of left track without thinking. The hull kisses a different line of brick and becomes more still, not less. The gunner's sight does a small circle around the place it wants and then sleeps there. The second round leaves, while the first is still telling the street a story. The German gunner tries to put his eye to glass and finds the glass is light. He has trained his arms to small, calm motions under stress. They do not help him hold on to anything that matters now. The intercom is a, "Did you say that back to his own mouth?" He says nothing because he cannot find a word that changes heat into air. The loader slaps a hand against the rack and feels the wrongness of the metal through the glove, the wrong temperature, the wrong texture, the wrong permission to be touched. He wants to reverse 2 meters and use smoke the way they have saved themselves before, but the engine note is a prayer and the transmission is a confessional. Neither answers. On the other side of the corner, the gunner's jaw is locked because he always locks it when the first shot hits. It keeps his teeth from clicking in his ears. He watches the reticle ride the same seam it rode a heartbeat ago and thinks about nothing other than not overcorrecting. The loader's breath hits his shoulder. He hears the brass clawed into the breech. He feels the turret make a sound like a sigh that means the next recoil will be honest. He is grateful for the honesty. The street tries to be helpful in the way streets are. Echoes dust, a glass bead skipping across tarmac like a clock. The driver tracks those beads the way a driver does when he wants to know if the world is sliding under him or if he is sliding over it. He does not need a command to keep the hull just dirty enough of center to hide most of his face. He does not need to be told that another 6 inches would show too much and that would be rude. He is polite with the corner. The second American round gives the cupola a new job lamp, not lid. The German commander's hand finds the rim and learns that steel can be hot in a way that goes through gloves. He lets go, and does not tell anyone that he has let go. The gunner tries to lay the sight by feel with his knee against the traverse pedal and succeeds only in moving the world in front of him an unhelpful angle. The loader feels his right wrist stop obeying and wonders if he has been hit or if the tank has simply decided for him. The radio on the German net pops with someone else's problem 2 blocks away and then pops again with nobody wanting to talk about this block. Silence is not an order, but it works like one. The crew is a room where decisions used to live. Now it is a room full of weather. Inside the American turret, the commander waits for something that is not coming, a return shot, a metallic knock that means they are still arguing. It does not arrive. He lowers his chin and lets the periscope glass throw him a strip of street on the right. The driver feels the commander's silence and keeps the hull where the silence is happiest. The loader's shoulders relax 1 notch and no more. He has seen the world take tricks back before. Someone in a window across the street decides not to test his luck with a tube because the coax coughs a short sentence at the sill without being asked. That buys the gunner the time to widen his eyes and then narrow them again. It is a small luxury, and he spends it cautiously. He puts the glass back on what used to be a turret and now is a light. For the German crew, time is not a line anymore. It is a weight that sits on the chest and does not move when they try to share it. The commander thinks about opening the hatch, and then does not, because the shape above it is wrong. The gunner tastes something bitter that might be smoke or might be fear. He has no minutes left to assign blame. The loader's throat is dry, and the canteen is on a hook he could find blind any day except this one. For the American crew, time is a staircase with shallow steps. They have climbed these before contact, send, confirm, hold, breathe. The commander listens to the radio for the voice that says move. It does not arrive, so he keeps his men part of the street instead of leaving it to the next set of hands. The driver watches a ribbon of oil snake along a crack in the pavement from the enemy hull and knows the city has chosen a slope, however slight. The gunner keeps the reticle honest and refuses to talk himself into shots that are not needed. He is not hunting. He is verifying absence. The smell changes first. Hot oil loses the edge that means it is still looking for new metal to ruin. The tick of cooling glass stretches the space between ticks. The light inside the German turret becomes the color of a bad memory rather than a command. The loader feels his hand again and wishes he did not, in case it has to touch something that used to be a person. The commander hears his own breath the way men do in rooms that have closed. Nobody says anything worth recording after that. The American crew does what trained crews do: scan, report, re-rack, keep a round up. The German crew does what crews do when habit ends. Reach for the handle they expect to be there, find it is, find it does nothing. The street goes back to being a place rather than a question. The cathedral stays where it was. Dust reconsiders where to settle. Later men will argue about guns and angles and who saw who first. In this minute, the bodies knew before the brains one side had no pause left to spend, The other had one spare. That is all a city needs to pick a winner. The corner remembers the choice, the way stone remembers heat slowly and for a long time. They do not announce it on the net. It shows up first in what crews stop doing. In the weeks after Cologne, Panthers that once parked to own intersections start taking positions one street deeper, where the first sightline bends twice. Tigers that once sat broadside across avenues to dare a column to show itself now angle hulls behind thicker masonry and ask infantry to hold antenna watch. The shape of a German ambush changes because the old one costs too much to try. Corners that were sermons become questions. Reports reflect it without the word for it. Patrols note armor noise moving away from contact sooner. Anti-armor teams are told to linger longer than they used to because the tanks they relied on to finish a trap are finishing fewer. Recovery crews see more burned-out cats with turrets stuck facing down side streets instead of out into the main. All of that is behavior, and behavior is confession. What dies is the belief that German armor decides range in cities by existing. The "we stand you stop" aura depended on a pause, the half-second where the other man would flinch and you would not. A gun and crew that refuse you, that pause make presence a target, not a rule. After Cologne, crews act like men who know the pause might belong to the other side. Air has its own version. There is a day when a Staffel reaches for the climb and discovers the sky has been bought out from under them by airplanes that do not get tired before they do. The first time a Mustang is still with you at the top, you do not write an essay. You take the next fight later or lower, or not at all. That change is the same change the streets make a habit that used to create safety, now creates risk. Sea follows slower but louder. U-boat skippers who once treated a convoy as a board with pieces to play begin to hear patterns, pings, bearings, hedgehog bursts that turn patience into exposure. The first time you wait for the destroyer to pass over, and it does not drop a carpet but throws a forward arc. Instead, you learn a new reflex, move early or die where you meant to listen. The ocean stops being an invisibility cloak and becomes a lit room. These are not slogans. They are small refusals. A panther declines to hold a line of sight that used to be a badge. A pilot declines to chase into a climb he cannot own. A captain declines to loiter at a depth that is no longer secret. Each refusal is rational. Together they are an obituary for a way of fighting. Inside German companies the tone shifts. Orders that used to read, fix and destroy read, delay and preserve. Preserving an asset is not cowardice. It is arithmetic when the factory cannot deliver the next one. But arithmetic seeps into nerves. A crew that has been told for months that their tank is a national treasure will not trade it lightly and lightless. Trades are how ambushes work. When you must save the instrument you need to kill with tomorrow, you kill less today. The Americans do not get taller because of this. They get steadier. A unit that expects the cat to stand and punish adjusts when it does not. Engineers lay charges 2 corners ahead instead of 1. Infantry clear roofs while armor holds the alley sinew-tight instead of reversing at the first flash. Artillery that used to fire blind smoke to buy any kind of motion now fires maps that assume motion will continue. Confidence is not a cheer. It is a lack of flinch. At the small scale, the inflection is the breath that does not hitch before the second shot. At the large scale, it is columns that do not pause for a day to negotiate one stubborn intersection, because the intersection stops being stubborn once someone has erased the example that made it so. Doctrine catches up to behavior. Push heavies forward to break the choke. Keep recovery close. Rehearse the drill where the first view is the firing solution, not the prelude. None of this requires celebration. It requires repetition. German diaries get shorter about armor. More lines about fuel numbers, fewer about stalking. More about where to avoid, fewer about where to set the snare. The pride remains the craft of laying a gun in a slit of air, the discipline of keeping a formation tight in rubble, but pride backed by scarcity changes shape. It becomes careful pride. Care is useful to live. It is poison to aura. Aura needs performance in plain view. The myth was never that panthers and tigers were invulnerable. Crews knew better. The myth was that they could control the conversation. Start when they chose, end when they chose, write fear into the other man's next approach. In Cologne, the film records a different conversation. Begin. get interrupted, vanish. Once that exchange exists in the world, men act as if it can happen again. They do not need to have seen the film. They hear it in the way the enemy comes around corners without stalling, and in the way their own commanders keep them one block back. There is an economy to belief. If a weapon buys hesitation in the enemy, it buys time. If it stops buying hesitation, it is an expense. The Panther that once purchased 30 seconds for a platoon now risks spending its own crew for 3. Commanders sense the rate and reallocate. That is the sane thing to do. It is also the moment when the legend moves from the front line to the museum label. Say it without embroidery, the aura ends when crews behave as if it ended. After that, each duel is only a duel, and duels without worship are just trades. The side that can afford trades wins trades. The side that cannot avoids them and loses ground while surviving. Avoidance looks prudent until it looks like retreat. Retreat looks organized until it looks routine. Routine is policy, and policy is admission. The last proof is in silence. There should be a triumphant call when a corner holds. There should be a clipped report when it fails, and the unit sets the next snare. In these blocks you start hearing neither. The net carries other problems, other streets. Crews do their work and say less about what their presence means. Presence without meaning is metal. That is the break. Not a speech, not a banner. A change in hands, eyes, pedals and triggers from forward confidence to conditional caution. From, we own this, to, we will try if the conditions are perfect. Once you are asking the city for permission to be dangerous, you are no longer the thing others cross themselves over. The myth does not shatter, it cools. And when steel cools, it keeps the shape but loses the edge that scared people. Columns keep moving. Not faster in a way the stopwatch loves, but steadier in the way. Staff maps respect fewer one-day pauses to negotiate a single intersection, fewer diversions to find a street that does not cost 2 crews. Recovery units earn their keep in daylight instead of solely at night. Engineers plan charges 2 corners ahead because armor can afford to hold a junction while roofs are cleared. Artillery shifts fire from blanket smoke to cuts that open the next block. The tempo changes shape, not a rush, a refusal to stall. The film from Cologne circulates beyond curiosity. In rooms where crews learn to live, instructors thread it into drills about sight time, turret discipline, loader cadence, and the 2 words a commander uses when the gunner already has the answer. The lesson is not this tank is superior. The lesson is the pause that killed us belongs to us now when we keep it. That is a doctrine sentence disguised as footage. Reports start to show different verbs. Pushed through, not held at. Engaged, not avoided. On the other side, German logs lean on nouns, fuel, hours, weather, because verbs that once sounded confident do not fit. Armor that once advertised presence now survives by management. Management is sane. It is not terrifying. Presence that does not terrify buys fewer seconds for infantry and guns to rearrange a fight. Without purchased seconds, a defense loses the ability to turn a city into a long negotiation. The change bleeds into other rooms. Air commanders talk about escort as a condition, not a luxury. With long-range cover, routine deep raids feed the same loop. The ground forces live on front line. Pain becomes changes in tactics and fit, and those changes arrive while the fight is still on. At sea, captains treat the forward thrown pattern as the default, not a novelty. Submarines that once treated patience as camouflage now recognize patience as exposure. Across domains, the story is the same. The old sanctuary corner altitude depth makes fewer promises. None of this erases the lethality of German machines or the craft of their crews. It erases the belief that contact happens on their terms. Once that belief fades, choices drift. A Panther that might have waited for the perfect shot last month now backs a length to keep itself for tomorrow. A Tiger that might have taken a wide avenue alone now asks for infantry screens. Those decisions preserve vehicles and experienced men. They also cede the minute that attackers use to knit combined arms back together at the curb. Minutes decide bridges and river lines. River lines decide calendars. Industry is the quiet author of the new tone. When a headquarters knows a replacement hull is on a ship, risk feels different. When depots push engines and final drives forward as if they are food, a battalion commander spends what he has to take a street because he believes he will still have a battalion on Friday. Germany's factories in this window cannot sell that feeling to their field units. Scarcity writes orders. Orders rewrite behavior. Behavior writes outcomes. Archive traces make the change visible without commentary. The Cologne clip sits on shelves because it shows a myth ending in natural light. Luftwaffe records note that escorts make deep strikes habitual. Habit means there is no safe sky left, and that planning must account for that, not wish around it. U-boat logs acquire small lines of dread, a bearing that fixes too quickly, a pattern that arrives from ahead, a decision to dive earlier that does not save the boat. These are not speeches, they are fingerprints. On the ground, the practical legacy is a standard drill. Heavies forward when the street is a lock, recovery behind them by minutes, not hours. Engineers rehearsed with armor until hand signs beat radio lag. Infantry trained to clear above while turrets hold below. Fire plans written on the assumption that motion continues after first contact, not that motion waits for a miracle. A city ceases to be a test of courage and becomes a test of procedure. Procedure is repeatable. Repeatable beats dramatic. The psychological legacy is simpler. Crews who enter a block expecting to flinch less do, and men facing them sense it, sensing that shifts choices before rounds fly. A defender who decides not to chance the old corner trick creates a chain reaction, less shock delivered, less time bought, fewer ambushes, completed more ground traded to stay whole. That chain multiplied across towns is a campaign moving from resistance to containment to collapse. Questions worth arguing cold and useful. If the heavier American gun and steadier sight had reached Europe half a year earlier in real numbers, does German heavy armor still shape the map, or does it merely fail more quickly in view of more cameras? Was the better tank the one with thicker plate and a sharper gun, or the one a system could risk at noon, repair at dusk and replace by the time the next city needed a corner solved? If aura is a weapon, what is its ammunition? And how fast does a production line for that ammunition run out? The series continues where the film points. Cologne is a city corner. The next study is the open and rolling ground where the Panther was drawn to excel. The subject is not fetish or scoreboard. It is interaction between numbers and numbers, gun versus armor, yes, but also tank count versus repair rate, combined arms discipline versus individual duel craft. The Sherman arrives not as a hero, but as a part of a machine that pays for ground with trades it can afford. Watch what happens when a medium built for production meets a medium built for perfection, and the fight is not 1 minute on film, but a week across multiple ridgelines. Leave the clip on the table and let the map take over. The aftermath is not applause. It is a quieter radio, shorter pauses, and these two facts corners do not hold as long as they used to, and the side that can keep trying owns the places where corners become corridors.